brief overview of what's happening. Right now we have 47 chapters nationwide. We have well over 65,000 members, which we are thrilled about. And if you all ever need anything, I will be local and in state. And mainly we're focusing on 2018. That is the goal, that is the focus. 2016, I think we learned very valuable lessons. And we want to make sure that 18, we do not repeat those same things. So we're going to be working to engage and mobilize young people, working very closely with local and state chapters nationwide to make sure that they have everything that they need, that we can act as a resource connecting them with national organizations and making sure that there are partnerships there. So that is my spiel. And Andrew Gillum is the 5th of 7 children. He is the first to go to college and graduate high school. He was born and raised in Miami, spent time in Gainesville, and he is the most progressive candidate I think I have had the honor of working for so far in my life. I am thrilled to make the move to Florida. I think he is the absolute best choice for this state, and I think that he also brings 15 years of experience. He served first as a city commission member in Tallahassee, Florida. He was the youngest elected at 23 while he was attending FAMU. And he then became mayor. He won overwhelmingly with 54% of the votes when people said that he wasn't going to be able to do it. And I think what's the joke? Your mom gave you $20 and told you not to spend it everywhere. That's right. So I'm going to let him come and tell his story and tell you why he is that person and why he's the best representative for each and every one of you. So thank you all.
Akila, I appreciate it. Akila has told my story, so I don't have to use my precious minutes in doing that, but I want to thank you first, Chris, wherever you are, Lisa, our chairwoman. I also want to acknowledge just very quickly, Diallo, you're going to be, is this public? Are you announced? Okay, Diallo, who will be a candidate for, I believe, City Commission. City Council 2019. And then you got Tracy, who is currently a candidate and will be running for the Florida House of Representatives. I want to give you both appropriate and due acknowledgement. Are there any other candidates, by the way, that are declared, that are running for office? Anybody thinking about it? Don't be bashful. I know there's some people thinking about it who are probably in this room. I certainly have to be very honest. When I was a student at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida, I wasn't necessarily thinking about running for public office, but I certainly was thinking about holding people in public office accountable. And that began for me taking on Jeb Bush in 1998 when he decided he was going to end affirmative action in all state contracting and in all higher education in the state of Florida. And he did that by executive order. The governor then followed up that agenda with a privatization agenda that we are still living in the legacy of today. In case anybody's confused about when this effort in our state to increase standardized testing, high-stakes testing in the state of Florida, the effort to increase the privatization of the public education system in the state of Florida. All those things began under Jeb Bush. And I spent my healthy bit of time protesting him quite a bit. When I was a student at FAMU, we went down to the state's capitol and slept on those cold marble floors, protesting Jeb Bush's One Florida initiative. We then ended up staying overnight a couple of times during the 2000 presidential election. Some of y'all might remember that came down to 538 votes. That's, by the way, not counting the over 20,000 votes in Duval County, which didn't get counted. 29,000 votes here in Duval County. So don't ever let it be said that that your vote doesn't count. I think y'all already know the power of the individual vote. We know, having watched Alabama, the power of the individual vote. And I'm gonna throw in there Atlanta, since I had a fellow Florida A&M University graduate who ran for mayor of the city of Atlanta. She was successful, but is now being, I think there's a recount, the person who came in second place is now trying to wage against her. It is certified, right? But she still wants to protest it. What'd you say?
Can't take it out.
All right, progress happened. Brother says you can't take it out. But when I finished at Florida A&M University, actually before I finished, I decided I was going to run citywide for a city commission seat on the Tallahassee City Council. At that time, I was a student at Florida A&M University, had little to no money. I raised about $6,000 in that race, and we ended up running and successfully winning that race for city commission. Y'all see me jumping ahead to governor? Successfully won that race for the city commission, and I had the opportunity to serve on the Tallahassee City Commission as a city councilman and now as mayor, now in my 15th year of service. But I have to tell you what I value and appreciate most about that experience is what we've been able to do over that period of time. I'm exceedingly proud that I was able to institute a program consistent with the restorative justice philosophy. So for young kids who are under the age of 18, who were first-time juvenile offenders, instead of them going before a court of law and being told that they've committed some crime against the inanimate state of Florida, they went before community justice panels. Ms. Jackson, Ms. Jefferson, school principal maybe a teacher, maybe a reverend or a pastor, maybe the victim and maybe the victim's family, and they got told how their actions impacted the community. And what we have learned in this experiment over the last 4 years is that our kids, when compared to the same demographic of kids who get adjudicated before the court in front of a judge, the recidivism rate in this state for that group of kids hovers around 40%. And our program, 96% of those kids never go on to recidivate over that same observation period. And it's not because we're so brilliant. It's because it's smart justice and it works. And quite frankly, that's the kind of justice that we need to see scaled up all across the state of Florida. Y'all have probably paid enough attention to what's been happening in Tallahassee to know that we have a governor who's a climate change denier. He says he's not a scientist and therefore can't say whether or not global warming is real, right? Never mind on a non-rain day in Miami Beach or even down the street in St. Augustine, or let a strong storm whip through here, you see streets being closed due to high tide in South Florida, right? We had the opportunity to expand Medicaid in this state to 1.5 million of the most medically needy people. What did our state governor decide? I'm not talking to myself. Did y'all know what he decided? He said no. He said no, thank you. And what that has done over the life of Obamacare, it has prevented us from bringing in $51 billion into the state of Florida. Count that with a B. 51 billion. Last year, 6 billion alone. Can you think of the number of jobs that could have been created had we brought in that money? Never mind the fact that it would have been good to make sure people had access to life-saving and maintenancing health care. Set that aside for the moment. Think of what it meant for jobs in this state. Think of what it means for a state that has a nursing shortage, right? Think of what it means for a state that is quickly aging, right? It means real jobs, it means real money, and you know what? It also means real lives. We have a governor who has refused to bring in Obama stimulus, right? He turned back $1.3 billion for high-speed rail. Never mind that it could have created the opportunity for us to build 21st century transportation in the state of Florida. I don't know where we're going to get it here, y'all, but we're not going to be able to build asphalt our way out of congestion in the third largest state in America. We got to start thinking about what does the future of this state looks like. We also got to start thinking about what does the future of this state looks like given some of the threats that we face when it comes to this state's future economy. Right? The fact that half these people in the state of Florida say that they cannot make ends meet. Start thinking about how we create the kind of economic opportunity that lets some of our graduates who are crossing the stage and are on the first thing flying out of here because they don't think that they can live their American dream right here in the state of Florida. I think they can. But we got to have a governor who understands a North Star, who's willing to invest in the kinds of job creation that doesn't just dangle money to recruit company X, Y, and Z into the state of Florida, but also invest in the talent and people, making sure that we got folks trained to walk into those jobs. That's why as mayor of the city of Tallahassee, we began a program called the IO Avenue, where because we received the tech hire designation for the Obama administration for the work that we're doing to train the next generation of workers for the jobs that exist today. I don't know about y'all, certainly for elected officials, I can't go anywhere without somebody talking to me about the need for a job or a better paying job. Yet we know that we've got jobs in the tech sector that are waiting for talent. We haven't produced it. And so I'm in favor of creating the kind of programming that allows our folks the skills that they need to go to work, make a good job and a good living for themselves and for their families. And it shouldn't be too much to ask in the state of Florida, the third largest state in all of America. We can do that. We can do better than that. And I've exampled it where I am. I've also not been afraid of a fight. I spent 2 years in court with the NRA and the gun lobby because I refused as a city councilman and as this mayor, the city of Tallahassee, to repeal an ordinance that said you can't shoot guns in city parks. Radical. You can't shoot guns in city parks where kids play and families picnic. And because of our refusal to do that, Florida allows for individual elected officials to be sued in their personal capacities. We have to be responsible for paying a fine up to $10,000. We're responsible for reimbursing the attorney's fees of the opposing party up to $100,000. And we can be removed from office at the discretion of the governor. That's law in the state of Florida, circa 2009, when it comes to gun reform, right? I believe that there are common sense ways to reform these kinds of policies, not to take away anybody's right, but to have common sense reform. I also believe that a weapon that can fire off 100 rounds, 100 bullets in less than 60 seconds is a weapon of war and does not belong in our city streets. If you want to shoot those weapons, join the military. Simple fix, right? But we got to be willing to say that. We got to be willing to stand for what we believe, because somebody's right to shoot an automatic weapon should not trump my right and my family's right to live, to survive, to breathe in our neighborhoods and our streets and our city parks or elsewhere. But unfortunately, we live in a state where we got folks who every year want to sponsor legislation that's called Guns Everywhere Bill, right? Put them everywhere, on college campuses, in classrooms. It's very sensitive to me because 2 days before I took the oath of office as mayor, I was at the campus of Florida State University at 2 o'clock in the morning because somebody decided that they wanted to try and manipulate and repeat a mass shooting. Thankfully, when law enforcement showed up, they didn't have 100 kids running around with guns, right? They knew who the target was. They knew who the enemy was. They knew what the threat was, right? And so we don't even carry some of this stuff out to its logical conclusion. When marriage equality was won at the Supreme Court, and we had county after county say that they would no longer issue marriage licenses to anyone, we said, come to Tallahassee, we will marry you, where we recognize that love is love. It's my job in this, in the process of creating laws that are equitable and respectful to all people, to make sure that we don't inculcate discrimination in our civil service laws. That shouldn't be revolutionary. It shouldn't be radical. Yet, it seems to be. When it comes to protecting immigrants in this state, we have lawmakers, Republicans, who make their very political life off of referring to undocumented people as illegals. Y'all have heard it. I was proud to stand up and say illegals is not a noun, right? Person, place, thing. It's not a noun. But you do realize that they use that language as a form of dehumanization, right? Because if you can strip someone of their humanity, you can take anything from them. Which is why we have to be willing to stand in the gap for those folks. If you're serious about bringing undocumented immigration into this country to a standstill for 20 million individuals who are right now in the United States, I would suggest to my Republican friends that they pass a law that penalizes and criminalizes every employer who exploits the labor and the work of undocumented people. They won't do it. Why won't they do it? Because they're not serious about it. They mean it as a wedge issue. They mean it as a way to divide us, right? Because they're terrified that we might figure out that we got a lot more in common than we do that separates us. And when we figure that out, that's when their political game is really in trouble, right? And it's one of the reasons why I'm committed to traveling all over this state, every part of this state. I've been in Bay County. I even went down to the villages. Y'all know what the villages are? Yeah. It is a planned retirement community, right? It is the most conservative voting precincts that we have in the state of Florida, and it was designed that way. Folks were like, Gillum, what are you doing in the villages? I was like, they're voters in the villages. They're in the villages. And we organized and went there for a meet and greet thinking we might meet 50 or 100 people, and I get there, y'all, and this room was teeming with over 500 retirees. Got another face in that room nearly that looked like mine. And that was okay, right? Because we got to talk to folks there too. And when we finished and we took questions, this elderly white gentleman stood up and he says, I believe Gillum ought to be governor. And I want to put $20 behind you to help you along your way. And I went to thank him, and then he turned around and says, no, I want to encourage everybody else who believes Gillum ought to be governor to put $5, $10, or $20 behind him. And when we finished, y'all, they had raised nearly $6,000 in $5, $10, and $20 contributions in the place that they told me I wasn't supposed to go, which is why we have to be willing to go there. I'm not afraid to compete against any opponent, and I'm certainly not afraid to campaign in any part of this state. Because if we're going to win again as Democrats, it means we're going to be willing to compete. We have to be willing to compete in all parts. Because the one who wins the race for governor is going to be the one who gets one more vote. One more vote. And that vote can come from anywhere through the length and the breadth of the state of Florida. So we're going to go there. Because what I think we have in common in many of the rural and some of the red places of this state is that they're terrified of their kids pushing themselves out of the public education system because they can't pass high-stakes tests, which don't tell us what our kids know but how well they take a test. They're terrified of their kids being opioid addicted because they see themselves in shiftless lives. They're terrified of getting sick because if they get sick in this state, they can't afford it. You get sick, you got to take off work. You take off work, you don't get paid. You don't get paid, you can't pay your bills. You can't pay your bills, you get evicted. The lights go off, somebody don't eat at night, right? That's the lived experience for folks in this state. And what we have to make sure they know is that we see them, that we care about it, and that impacts us too. And that we're committed to being the kind of defenders, not just sympathizers, the kind of fighters for the issues that they care about. Well, I want to fight for those issues not because I read it in some poll, because I got a talking point that told me so. I'll be a champion for those issues because I've lived it. Growing up in this state, at different times on welfare, as the first of 7 kids to graduate from high school, and the first to go to college, someone who's benefited from the public structures of this state from kindergarten all the way through university, right? My experience in this state is much more like the everyday folks who call Florida home than anybody else running, and that's okay. Because in my opinion, you shouldn't have to be from a famous family or to be able to stroke your own check to become governor of the state of Florida. Regular folks ought to be able to compete too. And I think this is our time. I think this is our moment. I think people want to see themselves reflected. It's called reflective democracy. They want to see themselves reflected in the people who get to make decisions about the future of this state. Because they're much more likely to see themselves in the policy pre-skips and in the policy solutions that will make this state work again. Not just the well-heeled and the well-connected, but those who call Florida home and are just getting up every day trying to make a way. Right? We got to create an outlet for them as well. As I was once told, if you are not at the table, you are likely on the menu. Right? And too many people I care about that have been on the menu. It's time for them to eat. And so we're going to run this race, and we're going to run it honestly and authentically. I'm going to tell you what I think and what I don't think. I'm going to tell you where we've gotten it wrong and where we've gotten it right. And I believe that's how we're going to get around the state and win. People aren't looking for perfect. They're looking for compassionate. They're looking to see themselves reflected, not just in the physical image, but in the problems that they confront every single day. They want to see that reflected in their government. And so we got to give them that opportunity. We got to give ourselves that chance. And for those of y'all who may be thinking about running or have run before or get out of here, don't talk to me about running. Right? It's time for us to put it on the line too. Right? We're not living in a political moment and a political time where we can just be observers to this process. Right? When we observe, stuff happens to us. Right? We need to be activists. We need to get out there, say what we think, stand in what we believe, speak our truth, and then get to work registering voters, turning voters out, and winning elections again. Y'all heard how close you are here in this county. I want you to know how close we are in this state. The last 2 Democrats for governor lost this state by fewer than 1 point. Lost the state by fewer than 70,000 votes in a state of 20 million people. Right? So I believe between your Facebook friends, mine, and our Twitter followers, we got that. We got to activate it. We got to activate it. And I believe as in the lead up to 2018, on August 28th, 2018, and then we're going to walk away the victor. And when we do, one, we're going to make history in this state, but number two, we're going to provide the kind of energy and resources that we need to turn that additional 1% of the voters who haven't seen themselves in the body politic, who don't feel like they're counted in that process, we're going to turn them out. And when we turn them out, y'all, we're going to win. We're going to win, right? We have to walk in that. We got to walk around here believing it. We're not a victim in the circumstances of Florida. We're participants. It's time for us to show up and win. So I would love to take any of your questions as we have some time with each other. I know that you all will have candidates cycling through here, and I think that's a good thing. You ought to hear what we have to say. You ought to hear what we believe. You ought to be able to ask us questions that either keep you from supporting us, or that have you supporting us, or somebody else. You ought to be able to demand that. A healthy democracy requires that we compete over ideas. In the Democratic Party, we got to compete over ideas, right? I don't personally dislike anybody who I'm in the contest with for governor, not at all. Our differences are substantive. And the differences between me and the front runner in this race are deeply substantive. And you ought to be able to hear what they are, know what they are, and understand where we stand when you're making a decision around who to support. I would love to obviously have your support, and I'm prepared to earn it. But you also need to be comfortable with the fact that you're not getting a milquetoast Democrat, right? I'm not going to be an apologist for what I believe. I'm going to stand firm in it. I'm going to try and bring more people to our side. And in so doing, we can win. All right? So I'll stop talking and take any of your questions. Don't be bashful. Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts on restoring Florida's film incentive program?
Full endorser of restoration of rights. And as I said earlier, you weren't here, but not only do I believe in restoration of rights for former felon, 1.7 million of them. I also believe that
film production.
I'm sorry, I thought you said what you feel about Lord Jesus. I didn't hear you. I think I was eager to tell you that I'm an endorser. That's what I think.
I like that too.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we agreed on that point. I'm also a supporter of the taxpayers for bringing back the film industry. As you probably know, in Atlanta, they got folks, standing out the door waiting to get in there to be able to make their films, right? Because we decided to walk away from that, choosing instead the profiteering and the incentivizing of big corporations to bring their next call center to the state of Florida, and to have taxpayers underwrite that, rather than bringing the kind of skilled labor and the skill work that could put people to work here in contract work. Making sure that, one, we keep telling the great news about the state of Florida through our scenery and otherwise. But also, it has a great opportunity to bring in some real talent. We got Full Sail, all these great institutions in the state that's exporting talent. Why? Because we're not allowing that to be used right here in the state of Florida. That's partly what I mean by the brain drain, the talent drain from the state of Florida. We've eyes wide open pushed that out. I think there's a great value to bringing that back into the state of Florida. And I have to tell you, as a mayor, I do believe in incentives to recruit good companies into your state, but I also believe in investing in the talent that could then fill that job, fill that workforce, rather than them having to go and bring them in from Palo Alto, or North Carolina, or New York City, or Chicago. We should grow that talent right here in the state of Florida. We should bring those companies in and force them to hire from right within this state because we have the talent, rather than seeing our talent exported. So I think we're agreed on two issues: felon re-enfranchisement, film credits. Yes, sir.
One of the things that would make your job a lot easier if you're elected governor is to have a Democratic legislature.
Yes.
So like the Senate is like 4 seats away from being
That's
a
right.
Democratic majority. How do you feel that we can kind of close that gap?
Yeah, well, elect Tracy, number one, to the House. And then in the Senate, we've got to do some work there. And by the way, I think the math will begin to work better for us in the Senate. I'm not counting the Senate out in 2018. It may be a chamber that we will either flip or come very close to flipping. The governor who was elected in 2018 will also be the governor who presides over the decennial census, and the governor who will either sign into law or veto the redistricting maps that are drawn as a result of, right? And as y'all know, we have a situation in this state where elected officials are choosing their voters rather than their voters choosing the elected officials, which is why you can get a House of Representatives in a state where Democrats have the advantage of what, over 200,000 more Democrats in Florida than there are Republicans, where the legislature is nearly, process-wise, an institution where Democrats can be irrelevant. Nearly. Thank God we made some improvements, right? But that's a problem. But that has a lot more to do, not with the politics of the state, the politics of who's in control when the decennial census happens and when the redistricting maps are drawn. Fair districts has helped us a little bit, but they're still being drawn by members themselves, right? And the last thing they want is the courts to draw them, right? And so I think, one, we need to continue to push for reform when it comes to the redistricting process. Who gets to draw the maps? I'm in favor of an independent redistricting commission. I'm also in favor of having primaries in the state that are open. And I know a lot of Democrats don't like that idea, but in a state where a third of the state are largely independents, we need to get them engaged in the process sooner, or else they get left out and then they don't feel incentivized to vote, right? So we want full participation. And I think one way to do that is to trust voters. I actually believe that if we trust them, more of us will win. The other thing that would make it easier, I have to tell you, is if we don't win back the race, the governor still has to be able to figure out a way to work across the aisle with the other side. I like to consider it cooperation, right, with one another. Compromise is a different thing. I like cooperation, where we can get some things, and maybe you have to leverage yourself to get some things. I will tell you, I am just wrapping up a 2-year fellowship with the gentleman who will be Speaker of the House if Republicans continue to hold leadership, Jose Oliva. We've got a great personal relationship. He has a set of values that he operates by, as do I. Where we can find compromise, we ought to find compromise with one another. Where we cooperate, we ought to find cooperation with one another. And where we don't, then we have to do what we got to do in order to win. And what I like about the state of Florida in some ways is that the governor has line item veto. It's a pretty persuasive tool when you're trying to compel cooperation. But I think you go first to where you can find some cooperation on an issue, and where we can't, then we've got to compete and make the best side win. But we do need enough Democrats in the House and in the Senate to make sure that a governor's veto cannot be overridden. It's important for us to at least maintain that. Today, we would have that, and I believe in 2018 we'll have that even further. Other questions?
As governor, what would be your biggest goal with furthering higher education in Florida?
Biggest what?
Biggest goal with furthering higher education.
Yeah, so first of all, I have to say we want to make sure that we keep college affordable in the state. It's one of the reasons why I've supported Representative Shepard Jones and his effort for free tuition at the state's community colleges. What we have proposed is a scholarship for service, which is for areas in this state where we have and demonstrate high need, right? Meaning we have a teaching shortage in the state of Florida. We have a nursing shortage in the state of Florida. Even in forestry, we have shortages. So if you are willing to do the work that is in service of the state of Florida, you give me 4 years, and I'll give you 4 years. I'll pay for your education for 4 years if you commit to giving us 4 years in the education system here in the state of Florida. Or if you give us 4 years as a nurse or nurse practitioner in the state of Florida, we'll support you through. Ultimately, we've got to make sure that we're creating more means-tested access to education in the state of Florida. That means if you can't afford it, cost should not be your barrier to being able to get a degree in the state of Florida. And obviously at the community college level, I think there is a really great opportunity in allowing folks to go to a community college, get a skill that they can monetize, and then get a job that pays them a good wage in the state of Florida, especially in a state where nearly half the folks say that they cannot make ends meet at the end of the month. I want to compliment the legislature for what they did last year. They doubled the amount going into need-based aid, but we still have a distance to travel there. That's all I have.
Yeah, so affordable housing. I
Yes.
deal with a lot of Section 8
Yes.
customers, and I'm curious on how you would approach that.
Yes.
In terms of,
Yeah, and by the way, it is not just an issue here in Duval County, right? It's an issue all over the state of Florida, affordable housing period. Section 8 being one part of it, but also, folks, who make 80% area median income still not being able to afford to live in the state of Florida. A couple of things. One, you may be familiar with the Sadowski funds. You probably are, given the line of work that you are, but it is constitutionally set aside to increase the inventory of affordable housing in the state of Florida. Every year, the legislature siphons away money from the Sadowski funds to balance the state budget. By the way, all the while giving corporate tax breaks to the largest corporations in the state of Florida. Matter of priorities, right? It's not because that money has to be used that way, especially in a state where we've had a surplus, right? Every year and counting. So one, we need to fully fund the Sadowski Act. The Sadowski funds need to go for their intended purpose to expand the amount of affordable housing that we have in the state. But there's some other tools that can be used as well. Local governments, and we've done this in my city, and I was proud to sponsor it, an inclusionary housing ordinance. For every 50 units that are developed, at least 10% of them have to be designated toward affordable housing, meeting the affordable housing need. So we get a marginal increase on the inventory there. We could work with our local government partners to ensure that. We could also adopt state language that allows that to happen as well to confront that crisis. The other thing that I've seen, and I think this is a unique thing that local governments and state governments can partner on, is that is in land trust, where we set it aside for perpetuity or for 99 or 100 years, land that is government land. We allow a private developer potentially to come in, build affordable housing. It superficially caps the value of the housing. So if you're a homeowner, you don't get the full value of what it means to sell your home and move someplace else. But if the higher public policy goal is to increase the amount of affordable housing inventory, you get to check that box. You get to expand that. There are a lot of, I think, constructive ways that we can expand affordable housing options here. Some of them I've tried at the municipal level. Others, having the state purse gives you additional opportunity to do that. But the fact that so few housing tax credit projects are being approved here, I think y'all had one last year and you got one more than we got in my city, and every year we have 8 or 9 of them where developers want to benefit from those housing tax credits, except the state, if they got it clamped. We've got to expand the opportunity to do that because the need is there. And it also serves a public purpose. You've got some hospitals that are Trauma One hospitals that are now being threatened because the employees that have to be able to respond in a Trauma One situation, you can't get them all there in time because they're having to live further away because they can afford less the housing prices near the Trauma One centers. It's a big problem. Yes, sir. Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've been ignoring y'all. We'll take both of you. Yes, sir.
Kind of a fun question. Where are you with cannabis legalization as far as criminal justice reform?
Yeah, I'm in favor of it.
Oh, great.
I'm also in favor of the legislature fully incorporating the medical access to medical marijuana in the state, of which we have not set the structures up for. And I think it's deliberately so. I also think that they are building as little amount of competition as they possibly can by using this term vertical structure. They're trying to build vertical integration where the growers and the distributors and the sellers are practically all connected. And if they continue down that line, I really do hope that there'll be litigation to break that up. I think it's non-competitive. But from the criminal justice standpoint, it makes sense given the amount of people that we're locking up over drug use, marijuana use particularly, marijuana sales. So I'm also for decriminalization.
Quick follow-up.
Yeah.
If you were to legalize cannabis, would you release people that are currently held incarceration for cannabis cultivation or sales or any of that?
I've got to check the law, but I'm not actually sure that the governor has the power to do that once justice is carried out. I'm not sure.
Good civics lesson.
Yeah, no, but I am in favor, however, of restoration of former felons' rights, which is, again, one step in the process of reincorporating individuals in society.
Mayor Gillum, thank you so much for being here and taking your time to talk with young professionals. Really appreciate it. My question, what are things you expect the Republican Party to use against you in the campaign, and how do you plan to, confront those tactics?
Yeah. They're going to throw everything, the kitchen sink, the kitchen, the person who built the kitchen, the one who sourced the supplies for that kitchen to be built. I say all that to say everything. But I think what they will have most is that I've got a record, right? I think they will scare the gun lobby activists against me. right? And they will say to their 5 million members of the NRA in this country that Gillum wants to take away your guns and doesn't believe in the Second Amendment, in spite of what I've said on the issue with regard to that. I think they will have more than enough to work with on where I stand on the issues. And if that doesn't work, they'll personally attack me as best they can. The way you overcome that is not necessarily by being perfect or saying that you didn't believe those things and didn't advocate for those things. I think the way you counter that is by turning out more of your base. By the way, they've been winning these last 4 cycles for governor by turning out their base, not convincing us they're going to be in our best interest. I think we oftentimes delude ourselves on the Democratic side into thinking that if we just nominate somebody more conservative, if we just nominate somebody less offensive to Republicans, that they're going to vote for us. And what they've shown us every single cycle for 20 years, that when they have a choice between ours and theirs, they're going to choose theirs. And what that means for our voters is our voters staying home. Again, we got the advantage, registration-wise. What we don't have the advantage of is turnout-wise. The way we're going to win is turn out more of our voters. It's not going to be by obfuscating. It's not going to be saying, oh, that's not who I am. It's not going to be, no, I don't believe in common sense gun reform. No, I don't believe that we ought to end this regime of privatizing a public education, that we shouldn't have health care accessible as a right and not a privilege in this state. It's not going to be by shrinking from those things. It's going to be by running to them. If that's what you truly believe, and then turning more voters out your way. I can tell you this much. My theory may not work. But the theory we've been operating by absolutely doesn't work. And I've got 20 years of documented evidence that it doesn't work. And so if you're willing to try it that way again, you go right ahead. But I can almost predict with great certainty what the outcome would be. I think what we have to do is be willing to be Democrats and to run as Democrats and compel people around why they ought to be with us on the issues, because we're with them. And what keeps our voters from going out is the belief that they don't believe that we have that value set, in large part because we run from it. Right? I'm gonna run to it. I'm gonna run to it not just because it's a great destination. I'm gonna run to it because that's absolutely what I believe, and I'm gonna run on what I believe. And they will attack me every which way. But if we have people who are with us, who believe like we do, who are willing to stand in their conviction, we win. If we don't, we lose. And by the way, if I'm not the Democratic nominee, I'm gonna work overtime to see that Democrat win. But I'm also telling you what I absolutely believe today in this moment, and I think we've got 20 years of proof to back it up. Right here?
One more question and then we'll
Can we do 2? Because I wanted 2. All right, I'll go quick.
You said you were going to run a campaign that was willing to acknowledge when you were right and when you were wrong. So I'm curious, in the 15 years that you've been in politics, what do you think that maybe in hindsight you did wrong, and what have you learned from it? How it allowed you to grow?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the areas where I went wrong is, if I had it to do again, I would have pushed for a Children's Services Council and an associated revenue source associated with the Children's Services Council. I honestly believe that the best investment that we can make is early childhood education. The Abecedarian study makes it very plain. A kid who has access to high quality early childhood education, their life trajectory is like this. Those who don't is like this. That's simple. And what I didn't muster at the time, largely due to people who were around me that kept saying wait, as I didn't muster the courage to go out there and try to get that on the ballot and to see it through, to see it passed. I will regret that for my time as mayor of the city of Tallahassee, that I didn't come out early on, advocate for, and try to see pass a Children's Services Council and an associated revenue source, because I think it could be transformational in the life of our kids, and thereby stemming the flow of folks into the criminal justice system, the dropout rate, and their life trajectories. I would do that again if I had it to do again. But I hope to make right by it by winning the governor's race and putting a primary emphasis on early childhood education. Yes, sir.
So we have a huge military, I would say, population in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Pensacola, Jacksonville, Talbot, Tech.
Yeah.
We have also people that are able to vote in the state of Florida outside of the continental U.S. who may not know that they're able to vote. My thing is partly helping people make sure that they have that rights. I only voted once while I was on active duty, and that was during the 2012 campaign. Why should veterans that want to move to the state of Florida or active duty military members, why should they vote?
Yeah, so first I say, because we want them to know as they retire from the military that there's still a useful place for them in our state. There's still work to be done. That not only is there work to be done, what we have to do, and I can tell you what we've done in my own city, we are a vet-friendly city USA. We have wrapped our city buses with the images and the likeness of military veterans who returned back to our home communities, Purple Heart veterans. At Florida State University, they're known as one of the most vet-friendly institutions in the state of Florida. For vets who want to get transportation to our vet clinic, which recently opened in my city, we provide free transportation. That was a decision made by the city council to make sure that that wasn't a barrier to entry. We also changed the policy in my city police department when it comes to hiring of veterans. Previously, you used to have to get a 4-year degree in order to be qualified to apply for the Tallahassee PD. Well, we said, if you served this country abroad, you've been a part of our military, we think you might demonstrate the kind of skills that we need, and therefore, you are not required to have a 4-year degree in order to make application to the city of Tallahassee's police department. I've also signed and been a part of the mayor's initiative to end veterans homelessness, and every year we've been making steps toward making sure that we move our veterans, the folks who have given so much to our society, to humanity writ large, from our streets, and put them into housing through a housing first model. So if you had to measure me on what I've done as a mayor and as a city commissioner on these issues, you will know that we've kept those issues primary in our city, and we don't even have a military base based in the city of Tallahassee. It's been off of what we believe is an important value, and we tried to live that value through our own public policy. Thank you all very much for the opportunity. I'm gonna step away.